WNST as I would like, because he's hiding as a writer in residence somewhere over there at Johns Hopkins. He is my longtime friend and old Kimosabi from USA Baseball, and he's written a bunch of books on a bunch of topics, including one very near and dear to me and my wife on leukemia and cancer that's coming out very, very shortly. But I know him as the baseball guy. You may know him as the Cancer Crossings guy soon. You can find him out on Twitter at Tim_Wendel. And he's the award-winning author of Castro's Curveball, Red Rain, and the Summer of '68. I've been seeing a lot of Summer '68 stuff around here with these Olympics, Tim Wendel. How is life? And I know you're about to make a baby, right? About to get another book out here. And I know one that's very, very near and dear to you. And doesn't have a whole lot to do with baseball, does it?
Well, it's got a little bit. It's great to be back with you, Nestor. Has a little bit to do with baseball. Actually, I think my love of baseball really took root when my brother was sick with leukemia, and it was one of the things that kept me going. So there's a little bit of baseball in Cancer Crossings. A brother, his doctors, and the quest to cure childhood leukemia, but mostly in some ways the doctors who turned the tide on this terrible disease, took it from a 10% survival rate to a 95% survival rate.
And I got the miracle in the other room. I got to point that out. So that's just not
correct.
That's not just a statistic in my house. That's a
No.
reality.
Yeah, you guys live in it. So, but those doctors really were and it was so much fun to track them down over the last couple of years because, frankly, Nestor, they were as close-knit, as resilient, and as successful as any team I've ever been around. And I've been around some amazing teams over the last many decades, and so getting Cancer Crossings out is great. We're swinging over the promotion on that, and people can do pre-orders now on Amazon, and the hardcover will be out soon.
Well, you know what? I'm going to circle back to that at the end of this, and I want to get into some baseball with you, but I just want to sort of set the tone for my audience. I mean, you follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and I told you I'm stretching out, and you're telling me about my Rob Halford interview last week. And, you know, part of this is I do want to go even deeper into baseball and football, and I'm going to be at the Combine this week and obviously at the owners' meetings, and, you know, I'm just trying to take a deeper dive into all this. Give me your background in baseball, because I only know you from Camden Yards in the early 90s and our paths crossing. I don't know what beach you were on or where it all came from. I knew you were a very respected writer, but author then. You wrote books and you dig deep dives into, the Minnesota Twins and into World Series and into Castro and into all these sort of esoteric things. But, I don't know the first time you ever fell in love with a baseball team or covered it, Tim.
Oh, gosh. Well, it goes back. The first team Nestor are really covered. And it's funny how the serendipity of things happens. I was just telling this to somebody the other day. I broke in covering baseball on the West Coast in the Bay Area. And actually, I had come back. I was with the old San Francisco Examiner, which Will Hurst III was the publisher. I'm now working for Will, helping him with a new magazine called Alta, which is about all things California. In fact, I just finished a piece for him about the Latino Giants. We're talking Juan Marichal and Orlando Cepeda and Felipe Alou, which will be in the next issue, the summer issue for that. But I'd always, I loved baseball. I worked on the Examiner as an editor and then as a writer. And believe it or not, I was coming back from the America's Cup in Australia. This is 87, 88. And I thought I was pretty much done. My wife had already taken a job at the Washington Post, and it was time to come back east.
So what Giants? You covered the early 70s Giants then?
Yes. I
the
covered
Candlestick Park, wind-blown Giants, and Willie Mays about to depart, and McCovey coming into his own there, correct?
Yep. And then certainly with Roger Craig and Hum Baby and Will Clark and all those guys.
So you were like Montefusco's no-hitter like that?
Yeah, it was a great time. But my neighbor...
I do this off the top of my head. I'm not Googling this. I'm just thinking like, Ontiveros and Spire, right? Like those guys, right?
Oh, yeah. Chris Spire was great. And... and Heck Davis, one flap down and all that type of stuff. And it was, I come back from Australia, and frankly, Nestor, I was ready to quit. I was ready to join my wife in D.C. And my editor, the sports editor, a guy named Charles Cooper, who believed a lot in me, kind of beat me to the punch. And he said, "Do you want to do baseball?" And I went, "Yeah, sure." And so I became the sling guy between the Giants and then the A's. Tony La Russa had just joined the A's.
Oh, boy, Bash Brothers were about to come to town. And you know what? I bet there was a guy named Boswell writing something about a steroid right around that period of time, right?
About that point, and Canseco never forgave him. And I made a deal with my wife. You know how we make deals with our spouses.
It's amazing how Canseco never forgave him for writing the truth, right?
No, it's funny. But I told my wife, I will join you in D.C., you know, and I'm kind of alternating between two teams, and I'm having a great time, and she'd already taken the job in D.C. I'll join you when, in a sense, these teams fall out of contention. I'm talking the Giants and the A's. And the A's pretty much fell out of contention very quickly in that year. The Giants came within one game of the World Series, and we did bi-coastal for close to 10 months, and I would do road trips with either team, hit D.C., and then fly back on the morning flight trying to get to my respective ballpark by late that afternoon so I could cover the game. And it was crazy. I would never do it again, but
love is a many splendored thing, right? They would say, right?
That's right. And then from there, ended up becoming one of the founders of Baseball Weekly when that took off in '91, and the infatuation with baseball continues from there.
Well, you know, around these parts, there are years where, you know, there's some hope, and certainly the Nationals have shaken up everything that they've done down there and throwing Dusty out, and time will tell whether that was a good idea or not. I mean, I'm a Dusty guy, and I know you spent plenty of time around Dusty. But the Orioles, I mean, we're really getting into a strange area here with a lame duck franchise player playing out the string. Everyone sort of knows it. The old man's kind of gone away. No one knows where he is. It's sort of Willy Wonka. No one goes in. No one comes out. Showalter's in his last year. Duquette's in his last year. Adam Jones is in his last year. Brad Brock's in his last year. Zach Britton is hurt and in his last year. And, well, there's the Machado thing. Wow, what a mess, and they don't have any pitching either. But other than that, let's sing John Fogerty's center field, and we'll see you at the ballpark in late March, huh?
Well, and unfortunately, as we've seen, the division has gotten much better. I mean, you certainly see what's going on in the Bronx, and I wouldn't sell the Red Sox short after getting Martinez. And frankly, I think the Blue Jays are going to be a little bit better than a lot of people say. But you got to answer some questions for me, because you and I, we've talked this before, and we've said kind of where's the plan, and I don't see a plan. I see an off season where we've got kind of the whispers or even the shouts of collusion, so there's bargains to be had out there, and I see the Orioles cutting payroll. I see, correct me if I'm wrong, but they've only got like 4-5 guys under contract for 2019. So I'm a little perplexed by what's going on. This is like everybody's going out the door in 2018. The division got much more difficult, and if it wasn't for the Tampa Bay Rays, this would probably be a last place team. So I don't know. Can you explain this to me?
Tim, if it were a restaurant, I'd say he's gutting the place because he wants to sell it, right? But
yes, that's what I'm thinking.
I wouldn't ever think, or look, I've been around this too long. I mean, you've written books on those things. I've written books on this thing. And I don't, nothing comes in, nothing goes out. I can promise you that. Tim, I've taken on 3 texts from people inside the organization, people that have been there from back in my day, and I've been banned 12 years. So people that have been around there longer than 12 years. 3 different people have texted me and said, something's got to give. I mean, what's going to happen here? And I'm like, pass me the popcorn, I mean, I feel like I'm on the Willy Wonka ride, I'm in the tunnel and sort of anything's possible on the other side. But I do know this, time's not going to stand still in these contracts for a Dan Duquette who's been trying to get out of here for 3 years, for Buck Showalter who's going to do pretty much whatever he wants to do when this ride's over. Adam Jones is going to get a deal somewhere, but I mean, to go backward to the collusion thing, which is where this whole thing began, and one of the reasons I wanted you to paint the bio of who you are and where you came from for some in our studio audience here who don't know, you were around for all that stuff in the 80s. I was at the newspaper and sort of reading about it a little bit in the early part of the Rosenthal era and the early part of the Buster Olney and the late Tim Kurkjian and, Richard Justice era, because we had such great baseball writers at the Baltimore Sun when I worked there. So, I feel like I got great reporting on it, but then into the 90s when I read Hellier's Lords of the Realm, it became much more clear to me how sort of laser focused that thing was on dragging salaries at a time when they hated Marvin Miller, they hated the union. You were in the middle of reporting on all of those strikes, not strikes, negotiations, all of that. This is how wars start, and certainly next year they're going to give Harper and Machado 30, 40 million, whatever it's going to be, and call it all fair. But somewhere in the middle of this market right now, there's a lot of Major League Baseball employees, and they've clearly gotten together to drag these salaries down. Now, whether it's collusion or not, you tell me. You were there 30 years ago. I wasn't, man.
Well, I guess what I look at, Nestor, is if it walks and talks like collusion. and a part of me is going, but why would they be so stupid to go this way? The costs for the owners, if they are found guilty, culpable, whatever, of collusion again, are so prohibitive. And the thing is, you look back at kind of the start of collusion, it was, in some ways, was Peter Ueberroth coming in and not being, he was an Olympic guy, and he wasn't that well fine-tuned on the costs of suddenly if you band together and you don't bargain in good faith and all this other stuff. And that's not to excuse what he did, but it blew up. Rob Manfred, to me, the current commissioner, and somebody, I've crossed paths with, I don't know him super well, but I can remember hanging with him and flying on the same flight back to D.C. after one of those ridiculous labor debacle meetings in '94, and the guy's sharp. And if that's your guy on top, if that's your commissioner, and yet you've got all this kind of happening again, I don't get it. Something here doesn't add up, and I guess part of me is saying I can't believe the owners could open themselves up to this again and potentially be so stupid again, because it doesn't add up. And it's funny because it's weird how some of these things come back around. One of the guys who got gone in the Hall of Fame this summer is Jack Morris. And I remember talking with Jack Morris for Down to the Last Pitch, but before then, when he was a victim of collusion, here's a guy who's wined and dined in New York by Steinbrenner. Looks like he's going to be a Yankee, going to make a ton of money, and deservedly so after the record he put up in Detroit, and all of a sudden the word comes down. No, don't do it. And he's still, what that cost him in terms of respect and money was profound, and he's still mad about it today. And so it just doesn't add up. And I think I'm amazed at times how the owners, kind of look at the union, the players' union, which in my mind has been one of the top unions, if not the best, in recent memory, and they underestimate them. And certainly Don Fear's long gone from the players' union, but they still got sharp people there. And if this has any semblance to collusion, if it can be proved, they are going to take this to the mat. And I can't believe the owners again have been this stupid. So that you can tell I'm amazed, I'm dumbfounded, I'm perplexed that collusion is suddenly coming up in baseball again. So,
well, it starts to feel like me to some of the TV money, that bubble's going to burst at some point. And it feels like the soft underbelly of this thing is, and certainly for me, and look, I'm running a trip this summer for Ray Lewis out to Canton, Ohio, right? So as part of that weekend, but we're doing the baseball game on Friday night in Cleveland. We're doing the baseball game Sunday in Pittsburgh. And the days of calling and saying, well, I want 200 tickets on the roof and they should be $8 or $10, those tickets don't exist. They're $25 to sit on the roof to get in at a baseball park now. And, I'm not one to talk about inflation or this or that, but I would talk about, like, what it's worth to spend a Sunday at the ballpark. I mean, I don't sitting on the roof or just to get in or just to be in the sports bar or whatever. I guess people are willing to pay it when you're winning or when the weather is good or when you're giving a bobblehead away or a T-shirt or whatever, a Jim Palmer statue. I don't know. But I do have concerns about the Orioles, and I see what the Nationals have represented in winning, and it certainly for our purposes here, it feels like a lost season, and it feels like a real lost opportunity in that it doesn't feel like they're going to get anything back from Machado. It feels like they're going to completely screw this thing up.
Yeah, and I'm afraid you're right. I mean, it's funny, way back when somehow people get it in their mind that sports is somehow above the economy, that it's somehow recession-proof or something like that. And I think the higher the stakes are, and the stakes are reflected in a number of ways: ticket price, player salary, number of, say, luxury suites you've got to fill as a franchise, etc. These kind of really leverage things out. And then, as you just said, if the economy is great, if the team's winning, some kind of combination thereof, it's not that much of a concern. But we've been in a bull market now 8+ years. You look at a team like the Orioles, which is going to potentially be battling the Rays for last place in a high-powered division. Suddenly the things where people think sports is recession-proof don't track. Years and years and years ago, I was down in, almost 20 years ago. I was in Dallas, and this is the older stadium, and the whole Dallas economy, because of oil, was going down the tubes. In fact, they had a name for the buildings they were building because they knew they were going to have any tenants right away. The office buildings were called see-throughs. You could see through them. And I remember being on the 50-yard line and talking with a couple of the business guys at the Dallas Cowboys, and we're looking around that old stadium. Not the new one that's gaudy as hell, but, looking up, and they had two rings of luxury suites. One was maybe about halfway up, and the other one was up toward the top. And I was just going, okay, the local economy here is struggling, pretty much because of the price of oil. What is going on? How many of those, say, first ring, the ones closest down to the field, have you sold? Luxury suites for next season. And the guy with the Cowboys goes, about 50%. And I'm going, okay, now's the tougher one. How about the ones up toward the top? And he said about 10%. And I think, we've gone through things where we like to be told that, baseball survived in the Great Depression. Well, that was baseball without some of the contracts we've seen, without some of the payrolls we've seen, and it was also where tickets were, really inexpensive. There were no luxury suites. So I think you're absolutely right. You're looking at what's happening with ESPN and where they're struggling in terms of trying to, attract viewers and make their bottom line. I keep wondering now, what is the next step? These kind of big regional sports networks, and are they going to pop? Are they going to pop like the housing situation did one time? And if that happens, then we've got a very, very interesting situation, because then we're really headlong back into some of the things, the haves and the have-nots in terms of salary. You brought up Machado, you brought up Harper. If the economy goes down and some of these regional sports networks start to bubble or pop like the housing market did a while ago, then suddenly you're only going to have a couple teams that's going to be the high-powered teams. They're going to be able to afford the contracts for signing these guys.
Well, I mean, the money for Peter's in his pocket already. Why give it to Machado? And more than that, there's $400 million now of disputed money in the Masson dispute between him and the Nationals. That starts to sound like a Bryce Harper and or a Manny Machado for one of those two franchises. And, the old man might die and never write that check, but that check's going to be written. And, I've written a lot about that. The Washington Post's written a lot about that. Mm-hmm. I don't see it in Baltimore, but it's $400 million, and it's real, and it's in the New York Supreme Court, and it's been getting kicked around up there for the better part of a decade now.
Yeah, very much so. And I think it's done, at least for down here in D.C., it's restricted sometimes with the Nationals will do, or maybe how they overreact, is how much of that money are they going to ultimately see. But I agree with you.
Hey, it didn't cost them Scherzer or Strasburg, did it?
No, they got Scherzer, but boy, it may cost them Harper. But they should have signed Harper a long time ago. But you're absolutely right. Who cares? You take Baltimore, you take whoever, Washington, take them out of the equation. Somebody else is going to pay for Machado. Somebody else is going to pay big for Harper, especially after I think both of those guys are going to have monster seasons, and which is the way it usually goes.
Tim Wendel is our guest. He is an award-winning author. The new book is Cancer Crossings. It's not a baseball story, but it does have some baseball roots. You can find him out on Twitter at Tim_Wendel. He is a writer in residence at Johns Hopkins, my longtime baseball friend, writing all sorts of baseball books. And this portion of our WNST programming and our journey out to the NFL Combine in Indianapolis brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to be the best at everything that they do. Branches throughout Baltimore and Maryland. We're telling you more about that. Download that ROFO app. Let's make sure you're using that real fresh, real fast at Royal Farms to gas up. Gas up now. Get your coffee. Buy the things you buy and get the rewards and the points later, and eat the fried chicken and the Western fries. That's the way I'm doing it. Also brought to you by friends at the Maryland Jockey Club. Cure those winter blues this weekend at Laurel. All the entries now up in the WNST morning newspaper, as well as on the front of WNST.net. Big appreciation for them. Tim, on the baseball side, the Machado thing's interesting because he wants to be a shortstop. He says he's a shortstop. His agent says he's a shortstop. Guess what? They're letting him be a shortstop. Why not, right? Move back and move. Let's let both guys play out of position, allegedly. It's been 6 years, 6.5 years, whatever it's been. I don't. The whole thing's so bizarre to me that I don't know where to stand, and certainly from a journalism standpoint, there's no one to ask a question to there. There really isn't.
No, and it's there's a lot of questions to be asked. I mean, some of them we were batting around, and when I was coming on to that, I got to ask Nestor about what is going on with this team, but. Yeah.
I have not a clue, Tim. I mean, I'll let you know March 29th when they get here.
You know what's unfortunate, too, though, Nestor, is we're kind of, how things kind of come back around. And I can still remember coming into Camden, oh, boy, this got to be 7-8 years ago, when things got really rocky and attendance was down. And coming in with, I think it was with Blue Jays were in town. I was walking into the opposition dugout with a couple of their guys from the clubhouse, and they were just like looking around, and they're going, we kind of miss the old days when this place really rocked. And then it took off again, and Baltimore's such a great baseball town, and people really know the game and everything, and it would be criminal to see it go back to those awful days where the place is half filled and the team's not all that good again, because frankly, the fans of Baltimore deserve much, much better than that. And I don't know, maybe Peter Angelos is getting ready to sell this, maybe not, but I guess it begs the question, if Peter Angelos was going to sell it, who would buy it? Is there local folks there that would take it, or
I mean, maybe in the old days when it was worth $300 million, yeah. Now that the operations of basically $1.5 billion, and Angelos has squeezed all the money out of it, it certainly would be more attractive in that. There isn't a whole lot of dead money outside of Chris Davis sort of sunk into the thing. You look at how Jeter took over down in Miami and sort of stripped the thing down to its core. That's the rage, though, right? Right, dude? I mean, look, you could sell this to anyone once Pittsburgh, Kansas City, the Orioles, the Astros, whomever, the Rockies, all sort of grow the arms and buy the bats and whatever that philosophy is. It's about young, cheap talent and drafting better, whether you're the Cubs, whether you're the Dodgers spending a lot of money, quite frankly, whether you were the Yankees back in the day and it was Posada and Pettit and Rivera and Jeter and Williams and those internal guys. That's always at the heart of all of this. Then the question is, well, the Astros sold their fans on 100 losses 3 years in a row, and look at how that turned out for them. But meanwhile, when you're making money, you're banking $80, $100, $120 million a year in profit in the day that saying, well, when tomorrow comes, we'll sign Hosmer, Moustakas, and Kane. And then tomorrow comes and you're like, well, they're almost 30 or they are 30 or how much? And this offseason's really been an interesting thing for the fans of the Pirates, the Royals, the Orioles, these teams that kind of came close or won, but now want to see something competitive, and they don't want to see, well, we're going to just lose 100 for a couple of years here while we get our pitching together.
Yeah, very much so, because it's the fans who pay, both, I think, obviously through the wallet, but also mentally when a team loses as much, say, as the Astros did. And I must admit, after last postseason, I was wondering, and I'm afraid we're starting to see it, in a sense, almost more teardowns, so to speak. I mean, you mentioned the Royals, you mentioned Pirates,
Well, there's no downside, Tim, other than losing, because you're going to make a lot of money if you've got a media revenue deal and you have some tickets sold and some suites that are committed or whatever. You're going to make some money. You tighten some expenses around. You have less people in the ballpark. You account for that, and you just say, well, we're just going to make $50 million instead of giving it to Manny Machado. We're going to put that in our pocket and sell this concept that now somehow fans sell it to each other, right? I mean, they go through the war, they do the numbers, and they say, well, it's better for us to suck now. And they do the shilling for the team to suck, honestly. I mean, it's kind of Stockholm Syndrome or something like that, I think,
It's
right?
very much Stockholm Syndrome. And yet you pay to enjoy Stockholm Syndrome, which makes no sense to me. But I don't know. It's funny when we talk, this way. I go back to something. I'm back now to '94 and the work stoppage and all that. And I remember talking with, I think it was Tom Glavine and David Cohn or something like that, who were among the player reps, and Paul Mauder was a player rep. And in a sense, they were saying at one point, the fans have much more clout than they realize. And if the fans had just kind of said, enough of this, it probably would have ended. And I kind of feel that's the same way now with fans of respective teams. And kind of the thing that's been sold now is what the Astros were. And
we were sheep back in the 80s for all this, right?
Well,
the fans didn't want to believe in the strike. They didn't want to believe the collusion. Sure.
And we're still sheep on it. And all it takes is like one team, we'll be like the Astros. Well, not everybody can be like the Astros. And so there's going to be a number of teams that will never, be that close or competitive for a while. And it's, I don't know. Again, I'm kind of reminded of what those guys were saying way back in the day. The fans got more clout, but the fans never bring the hammer down, so to speak.
Well, he always had clout as an editor at Baseball Weekly and USA Today. He is now the award-winning author of many, many books, including the new book, Cancer Crossings. I'm going to give him a chance to tell you about it. He is a writer in residence at Johns Hopkins. That's my next job. When you vacate, I'm going to move up to Hopkins and be the writer in residence. Tell me about Cancer Crossings, because I know this really hits home for you. I know Ken Burns was involved in writing a little forward for you and saying some nice words. You reached to my wife and other survivors as well. And I know it's right around the corner. It's right here. It's coming out this month.
Yes, it's coming out at pretty much end of March. And again, it was something that totally surprised me. I've now got a daughter who's a doctor. Back when my daughter was in medical school at Georgetown, she came home one night for dinner, probably borrow the car, do laundry, do something. And she said, "Dad, you had a brother die of leukemia." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "How'd that happen?" And I could not answer any of her questions about, what my brother went through, what kept him alive, what eventually killed him, etc. But I sat down that night and I started, I was embarrassed, frankly. And I started just doing some research. That's something I can always do. I can do my research. I can talk to people. And I found pretty much the 4 to 5 doctors who turned the tide against acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And they, as I alluded to earlier in the show, took it from a death sentence back when my brother was diagnosed in the 60s, late 60s. It was 10% survival rate, and embracing chemotherapy, blood centrifuge machines. We're doing, human genome, etc. It's now a 95% survival rate. And the thing is, we talk sometimes about, we need a cancer moonshot. Well, we had one. I think what we really need is to continue the lessons from that cancer moonshot success and other ones. And frankly, in talking with these guys and in doing Cancer Crossings, the book, doing some video now for it, etc., we've got to change a little bit of the way we go about things, somewhat in the healthcare field. These guys weren't in it for the money. Time and time again, they would come up with new innovations. They conceived the blood centrifuge machine, which kind of separates out platelets and granulates, all these things that you guys well know more than anybody. And then they made it free to everybody. And I think, we need to kind of come around back to that. I think there's extraordinary people out in medicine. At times, though, I think they need a little bit more of the leadership and the camaraderie, and I hate to say it, the teamwork that these guys exhibited. And these guys are all now in their late 80s, early 90s, and to spend time with them.
Many still alive, right?
Yes, many still alive.
Wow.
And in fact, one guy who was in the book, Dr. James Holland, I was just talking to him a while ago. Jim is 91, still works 3 days a week at Mount Sinai in New York. And I was talking to him a while ago, and I was kind of saying, Jim, you're kind of getting on in years. Why you still working so hard? And he kind of got back on my grill, and I kind of deserved it maybe a little bit. And he said, hey, I was part of the group that turned the tide on ALL. I want to be part of the tide that changes that, say, on women's breast cancer. And I felt if I could get a couple more years, I can do it. And that's how driven these guys are. And I think sometimes we as a society have to recognize what good they do and really just try to grease the skids as much as we can to have them do their jobs. These guys are incredible, men and women, just incredible doctors. And you've, obviously benefited from that in your family situation. We're making progress. Great progress has been made. I think even more can be made if we can find out ways to help these guys along even more.
Tim, it's always a pleasure to talk baseball with you, even more so to talk about Cancer Crossings. A brother is doctors in the quest for a cure to childhood leukemia. Tim Wendel can be found out on Twitter at Tim_Wendel. That's Wendel. And, of course, writer in residence at Johns Hopkins. I hope that your arm is stiff and you need rotator cuff surgery for signing too many books or whatever, writer's cramp, whatever that thing will happen, break a leg, whatever they would say to you. But hopefully the next time you and I get together, the Orioles aren't 10 games under 500, Tim.
I hope so, too. Have fun at the Combine.
Means I better get you in April.
I didn't realize that was, we're going to do this quick. I didn't realize the Combine was up already. I got to start practicing my sprint or something.
Hey, man, we got Combine, draft, opening day around the corner. Before you know it, it'll be Preakness, and we'll have the pretty girls down at the beach. So, Tim, spring's around the corner. Trust me, man, and good luck with your book. I love your work, and we'll stay in touch for sure.
Very good. Thanks, Nestor. Have a great evening.
You got it. Tim Wendel. He is Tim_Wendel out on Twitter, award-winning author of Castro's Curveball, Red Rain, Summer 68, a billion other baseball books, and other things. This is a cancer book, and you can find him out on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. So I'm linked up with him as well. I'm linked up with our friends at Fremont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need Fremont and their education online. I want to remind everybody Fremont Mortgage sponsors all of our swabbings. We will have head coach Barry Trotz from the Washington Capitals joining us on March 29th. That's opening day of baseball for you and me. That evening, head coach Trotz is coming up, sneak into town. We're going to talk some hockey on the eve of the Stanley Cup playoffs that head into April. That's all brought to you by Fremont Mortgage. We'll hear from Carl later in the week. Also brought to you by our friends at King Discount Liquors, Lottery, Beer, Booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. Get to Rosedale and give the King a ring out on Pulaski Highway. Big appreciation to them. I'm like Def Leppard would say, high and dry. I got to get out there this Saturday when I get back from Indianapolis. Luke and I are in Indianapolis all week long for the NFL Combine. I'm assuming there'll be some celebrities, some scouts, some pundits, some writers, some broadcasters, all that stuff. All of it brought to you by our friends at Maryland Jockey Club. Cure those winter blues this weekend at Laurel. The race Results as well as the entries now available one click away in our morning newspaper. That's all brought to you by Planet Fitness. Also out on the front of the website for everybody who is a racing fan at Laurel and Pimlico. Maryland Jockey Club partnering with WNST this year. Very, very happy about that. Also happy that the Pizza John's is with us. I've got my mom's favorite pizza, my wife's favorite pizza. I brought the pizza home last week. I got to eat the leftovers. Go see why they've been doing it for 50 years down on Back River Neck Road. I am packing my Pizza John's hat to wear during our broadcast in Indianapolis. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We're also out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day. All of our stuff from Indianapolis and the Combine will be there as well, breaking down all sorts of aspects of what the Ravens could be looking at, players they might be targeting, Luke and I in Indy, and it won't even be cold. Last but never least, any breaking news out of Indianapolis, any breaking news with the Orioles and trades and maybe another pitcher or 3 or 5, who knows? You'll get it first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.